As I came up in the HVAC trade from many years ago, starting in the early 1990s, lasting until the present day, I can't say that I always acted with integrity and did what was best for the customer and did what I thought was right. It was a learning experience. There were challenges I faced along the way, starting when I was a teenager. In 1994, I was 15 years old. I went to work for my father in the summertime, just doing remedial activities like running ducts, building little metal boxes, doing whatever I needed to do. Stuff I could pick up quickly and implement in the field to help him out. As time went by, I got my license in 1999. I became a North Carolina licensed contractor, license number H3-23041. Thought I was really cool. Actually, I didn't know anything. I knew nothing. I knew enough to pass a test, which I was good at. I've always been good at school, even though I dislike school in general. I didn't have any problem in school. Usually was pretty good at taking tests. I could pass a test. I went up to NC State and took my licensure exam and got a passing grade, because all they tell you on that test is they tell you pass or fail. So I came back in 1999. I was working for my father. Back then I had a NC license. I was making $12.50 an hour. It's hard to believe someone could make that much these days. But back then that was big money. I wasn't living on my own. I didn't have a wife and kids. I was basically buying cigarettes, booze, DVDs, because they had just come out and were the hottest thing. I still remember the first DVD I bought was The Green Mile. I was all excited about those because it was high definition. And now I can't even find a VHS cassette or an audio cassette. But I had many challenges. I got married, had children. And when you get married and have children, it puts a burden on you that you welcome, but you have financial burdens. You have other things that cause you to test your integrity, test your conscience. And it's no shock to anyone that every single one of us, or at least anyone that I know, have failed that test at one time or another, including myself. Cut a corner, done something you shouldn't have, misdiagnosed something, charged for a repair, then figured out it wasn't broken. Never told the customer, just let it ride. Has everyone done this? Some people will say they haven't, but I don't think that's true. I think we all have done that at one time or another. I know I have done it on a few occasions. Different things. I always learned from it. Eventually I got it through my head that the right way and the easy way are very seldom the same thing. And almost all the time, to do something that is right, it is difficult or challenging. It could hurt yourself. It could hurt the people around you. But it's just something you have to do, just because you believe it. I faced these challenges recently. I did what I thought was right, and it didn't end up to be the easy way, but it was the only way. As I go forward, I try to do things with integrity and conscience, but we're all just human. We have to understand that. We're all just human. We go through our lives trying to do things the best we can and do the best by people, but there's 1,000 different things that pull you in 1,000 different directions. And you have to face those things and realize that if you do falter, make it right, or at least learn from it. That's what I've tried to do. I've failed a lot, and I hope I succeed as well. My name is Zack, and this is The Tradesman. As you can tell from the intro of this particular podcast, it's going to be addressing some of the issues we face in the field. Integrity, honesty, making decisions when you're in a bind. Because everybody has great integrity, theoretically. But when you get into the field and you get into a vice, morally, you tend to waver a little bit. We're going to talk about a few issues like that. More so, just some issues that contractors face. I'm bringing back old Curtis Bowers. We're going to talk about things he's faced in the field. He's going to update us on the Ameristar unit from hell that was a super leaker, which he intended to get replaced with a brand new unit. We're going to find out, did Curtis get that to happen? It's a very difficult task. Not a lot of people can get a unit replaced unless they have a lot of clout or the unit is very young. And Curtis's unit was almost 4 years old. Actually, it might have been more than 4 years old. So we're going to find out if he was successful. We're also going to talk about some ethics in the HVAC field, and it'll transcend the HVAC field into electrical, any trade, or really any part of life. Because Curtis faced an ethical dilemma, and we'll see what he did, how he feels about it. Because it's a very, very sensitive subject. Because if you've ever been in an ethical dilemma, especially with a close friend, it can feel very bad and get very bad very quickly. We're going to talk to Curtis about those issues and a little bit more right after this break.
Jackson Systems is your controls expert in the HVAC industry. With our top-notch technical support and customer service, we make life easier for you, the HVAC contractor. We offer free trainings on any product sold here at Jackson Systems, along with our filter fetch program, free thermostat and printing, home and business automation with connected sensors, cameras, and even smart stats from Nest, Ecobee, Honeywell, White Rogers, Google, and more. Visit us at jacksonsystems.com to see the products that continue to win industry acclaim among contractors worldwide. Jackson Systems, controls done right.
The Parker Sporland Zoom Lock is one of the hottest tools right now. And the Zoom Lock Roadshow is making its way across the United States so guys can see firsthand what this tool is all about. You can learn how to easily use the Zoom Lock flame-free refrigerant fittings. You can watch a live pressure test of a Zoom Lock fitting you have crimped. You can enter to win a couple cool prizes and get a free t-shirt out of it. So if you go to zoomlockroadshow.com, you'll be directed to the information about this particular event. Hopefully you have one nearby. Go check it out for yourself. See what the fuss is all about, and see why a lot of people love and trust the Sporland Zoom Lock. We're back with Curtis Bowers, here to get an update about the Ameristar Leakathon 2017. Curtis, where are we at with this tragedy?
It is fixed, Zach. It is.
Oh, fixed. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. What'd you do?
I found it and I fixed it.
So tell us a little bit about the saga, because you wanted to get a new unit, correct?
Yes. I actually went to my supply house, found that the leak was in the outdoor unit. From where it looked, where the oil was, looked like it was in a fitting that wasn't soldered very well. And that was after I had initially wanted to put dye in the system, and it came back to the system and it was flat on charge again. What I did is I went to my supplier, explained the plight, and of course my supply house says it's been in there 4 years and there's nothing really they can do. They didn't give me a big FU, but it is what it is. The manager told me that he would go up with me and talk to the guy and smooth it over and everything. And we made appointments to do that, and with weather and everything, it just didn't work out. So I went back this past Tuesday to do a leak search on it, and where I found it was amazing. Just amazing.
I had another question for you before you go on. Do you think that if it was an American standard, like one of those nice gold series units, would they have given you a new one on that one?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know. The unit had been in for 4 years. I hadn't had a long string of problems with it. The manager said that I could have went to the technical rep and I replaced the indoor coil, which makes me wonder if the indoor coil was where it was leaking to begin with. But I did find a leak on the indoor coil, but I changed it nonetheless. I don't know, Zach. That's a good question.
Well, I wondered that, because American Standard, that's the fancy stuff, Curtis. That's the fancy stuff. So those guys have some big dealers that come in there, and those big dealers have clout, and sometimes they throw it around. Like
I'm a dealer, but I don't have clout. So.
Oh, okay. So the second question is, so Curtis, where was that leak at?
Funny you should ask, Zach.
It's like we planned this.
Yes, imagine that. Well, I sent you pictures earlier in the week. Where I found it was amazing. It was a little stub out on the side of the pipe adjacent to where it ties into the compressor. I'm thinking that's where they pull a vacuum on the system or flow nitrogen through it while they're sweating it in or however they do it. And then after they're done, they pinch it off and solder it shut. Well, this particular little stub out had two crimps on it. I don't really pay much attention to them, but from here on out I will. This one had one on the upper part where it was soldered in and one midway where it ties into the main line. When I put 300 pounds of pressure on it and sprayed everywhere, that's when I saw the bubbles. It's not a very fast leak, and I think just over the period of the last 4 years where the outdoor unit was jarring and moving and vibrating, it just caused it to start leaking. I've never had it leak there before. That's
I think that piece is called the process stub or the process tube, and I've only seen
Okay.
it happen once or twice, and it was in much older equipment.
I would expect it if it was leaking from where they crimped it on the first time. I didn't understand why that thing was crimped a second time. It was to the point where I can just break it off with my hand. Like I told you, the last time I was there, when I replaced the coil last year, I pulled a vacuum on the indoor coil and line set. Don't remember if I pulled a vacuum on the whole system or not. I cannot remember.
You probably pumped it down when you changed the evaporator, so you wouldn't even have suspected another leak in the condenser.
Yeah, I think whatever was left in it, I did pump down. It is what it is, but now it's fixed. I had no callbacks. It's been cooling, and it's really been nice weather here. We've had some cool nights, cool days, so he ain't really been running the air conditioner. But I'm gonna give it a couple weeks and call him back and see how it's going. But no new unit, even though I was upset and aggravated.
Well, let me ask you something. Have you ever had a situation where you've received a new unit in any case? I'm curious because this has happened. I have a story to tell, a counter story to your story.
Okay. No.
No. Okay. Well, only time I've seen it happen is years back. There is a device on some of these Goodman 14-SEER R22 units called a compensator. It's like a receiver for refrigerant if the refrigerant charges are different in heating and cooling. So this compensator was real close via the 3/8 stub that comes into it to the compressor, and the vibration on that thing would break that stub clean off that thing. You'd go in there one day, it'd be like running great. The next day, no gas. And I changed one out. 2 days later, it broke again. And this is for my father years back. So he ended up getting a new unit, and it was 18 months old. So that was a good thing. The lady comes out of the house, because my father's name is Terry. She comes out of the house and goes, Big Terry's he's not gonna like this. He's gonna go to Johnstone and get him a new unit. I was like, he's gonna try, lady. And he was successful. So that was 18 months into the life of the unit. 4 years is a long time, though. But I have a sad story, too, Curtis. Sad. I had a Heil unit. So we're going to pick on ICP now. So we're going to go on down the line.
Okay.
A Heil unit, package, rooftop unit. In the first 6 months, the X13 blower died, and then the compressor went bad. And I had to replace both of them, and I asked for a new unit, and they said no. They said no. That is not early enough for Heil to replace the unit. You're going to have it explode the day of, you know?
Oh, my Lord.
I was pretty ticked off. I was like, hey, man. Because the Ari Michael guy came out there. He's like, well, we can give you a new compressor. I was like, yeah, I know that. It's under warranty. I said, I want a brand new package unit. He's like, oh, we can't do that.
Oh, my goodness.
Grrr.
Well,
That's what happens to the little man. If I was a big man, I would have got 2 package units, one for my house and one for that location.
well, if we do, $350,000 a year, then yes.
I was only barely short by $312,000. Let me ask you this, since we talked about some of the worst units made in history already in this episode. What is that the worst one you've ever had? The one with the leak, the 2 leaks, I guess?
As far as Ameristar goes,
In general.
I've installed a lot of different types of equipment. The worst piece of equipment out there, as I have to say, is York.
York. You had a disaster, York?
I hate their air handlers. Their outdoor units are ridiculous. Their LX series is noisy as hell. Their furnaces are a joke. Plastic doors. Who the hell puts plastic doors on a furnace?
Plastic doors on the furnace?
The clips. It's metal, but it's got like a plastic coating, like a composite on the front. And they got plastic clips. And those clips break. I mean, it's like putting plastic doors on a furnace. I mean, really?
I'm sensing some hatred for York. I'm going to tell you, I'm not a psychologist, but I can pick that up fairly easily. What was the biggest problem beside the functionality and maybe the sound level? Did you have many issues with the machine itself?
I'm glad this came up because this brings to another story
Uh-oh.
that would be perfect for the podcast.
Well, good thing we're on a podcast right now.
I was doing some sub work for a contractor, HVAC contractor, when I was in business for myself, trying to make some money. And he was willing to give me some of his work. And I do his installs. He bought the equipment, material, and so forth. And he just paid me straight labor to do the work. He couldn't find anybody or keep anybody. He had some issues with his Yorks. Me personally, I just don't like their design. I do not like their air handlers. He has not been putting in Yorks for a while. I guess he might have had some issues with York or disagreements with York, or maybe he just despised them as much as I did. He quit selling York. So this particular contractor started putting in Ameristar. My supply house will tell you he's one of the biggest Ameristar installers in this area. On this particular job this past summer that I went on a couple of months ago, they had just bought the house. It has 3 furnaces, 2 90%ers, 1 80%er. They're all dual fuel. The one system that feeds the main level, the coil, and all of them were Hiles, by the way, put in an O2. The one feeding the main level, the coil and the heat pump, I guess, were changed out. I don't know if you would do this. I've done it myself. Instead of taking the entire case out, they took the front case of the door open, took the coil out, left the existing case, cut the ductwork up because new coil is going to be taller, slid the new coil in, put the door on, and made it look as much like it was part of the system as possible.
Well, what do you think of that? Would you do that sort of thing? You're being recorded, Curtis.
I'm on the rope. I don't know that. Yes and no. I've done it before, but depending on whether or not I could get the coil and all the stuff out, maybe, I don't know. The second thing is, as you know, Ameristar requires a field installed filter dryer. It's in the paperwork. Filter dryer was missing. Outside, I checked inside because a lot of times I put it on the inside. It was missing from the inside. It was just not there at all. And it had been in there for almost a year. Maybe I broke a cardinal rule. I don't know. But my conscience is clear. So I called the homeowner. And I relayed to the homeowner what I'd found. And I told the homeowner that it may void his warranty since it wasn't in. I'd have to talk to my supplier to make sure. And I was actually installing the exact same piece of equipment, 80% furnace, coil, and heat pump. I got in touch with the supply house, and it doesn't void the warranty. But he wanted me to give him a price, and I gave him a price to install the filter dryer and so forth. Well, he said he found the person who had first installed it, and when he sent me the name of the company, I looked at it and I said, oh, shit.
What does that mean? Does that mean, oh my gosh, this is the guy that
Yes.
he just never installs filter dryers, that kind of guy?
It was the guy that I'd done some work for, a buddy of mine.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Make a long story short, I did my work. He fixed his mess up, and life goes on. A couple of weeks ago, I'm getting a quote on a system and picking up some material, and he rolls in. I look over and I say, hey, how you doing? I say, hey, Lee, how you doing? First thing out of his mouth was, I got a bone to pick with you.
Oh, busted.
Yeah, and I knew exactly what it was. And he said, you know such and such? And I said, yes, I do. And he said he didn't think it was right for me lying to the customer just to get extra work.
All right, Curtis, this is the next question that comes from the psychiatrist chair. How does that make you feel, Curtis?
Well, you couldn't cut the tension in the room with a knife.
I can't even imagine. Well, I can't imagine. I have seen moral dilemmas. I have been familiar with those. So it is interesting that he has a problem with it because it's something that had to happen. You had to have that filter dryer in there for it to work properly, be well protected. Mm-hmm. So if you don't say it, you're neglecting to give him good advice. But if you do say it, you feel like you're some kind of HVAC narc. So what do you do?
I don't feel that it was right for the customer to let each of us know who did which work.
No, I can agree with that. It puts you in a really tough spot to have somebody say, well, Curtis said this was wrong and you need to fix it. Curtis Bowers. Here's his address and phone number.
We all know how customers can exaggerate and blow things out of proportion. Being business owners, we know that. And this was, I believe, a perfectly good example of either the contractor was blowing things out of proportion or the customer was blowing things out of proportion. I'm going to take it for what it's worth, and I'm going to say they were both blowing things out of proportion.
I've seen it happen quite a bit. The capacitor called the compressor.
Well, I told him it was nothing like that. It wasn't like that at all. I explained to him the situation. If he wasn't a Christian or Nos Dai Saul person, he'd have probably tried to whip my ass. He feels that, I guess, was trying to talk bad about his company, and that's not the way it was. But I explained it to him that I'm sorry it happened. I did the Christian thing, and if I had to do it again, I would. It's not against you. It's just my conscience is clear. We're good to a degree. Now, see,
That sounds great.
well, here's the thing. I broke my ankle in 2014. It was on one of his jobs. Could I have taken legal action against him? Yes, I could. Could I have done some stuff to him that wasn't right? Yes, I could, but I didn't. I took the high road, got fixed up, and went on with life. I told him, I says, I've been through my pain with you, Lee. Tapped on my ankle there. And then he looked at me and he says, it ain't my fault you can't walk right.
Oh, good grief.
And he told me, he said, you're lucky I don't break your other ankle.
Well, I can see why you said there's tension in the room. That brings up an important discussion because it's sort of like a moral code in the field. It's the same thing. If you would have known this guy did the job before you saw the filter dryer was missing and then you found the filter dryer, would you have still told the homeowner?
I'm going to say, yeah, Zach, because it's a moral thing, man. It's not that I'm trying to call anybody out. It's the honest thing to do. As much as it pained me, I told him, I said, the truth hurts. But in the end, it hurts because it can cause rifts between friends, rifts between individuals, contractors, what have you. One thing I learned, though, this type of work, it's cutthroat.
You're right about that. While we've been talking here, 5 more companies opening up in your town.
It wouldn't surprise me. It would surprise me.
I watch this stuff every day on YouTube. I see it out in the field. Let's take the guys out there that you open up the door of the condenser and you have all the capacitors laying at the bottom. They're in boxes. They're on their sides and stuff. Does a technician go in there and just fix it and then give them the price for it? Or does a technician go inside and have to say, oh, this last company did this last company did that? Do you skip that process? Do you tell people about that or what?
If I run into something that doesn't look right, of course I bring it to the customer's attention. If I don't, then I was the last person to put my hands on it, and if something happens, that's on me.
That's true.
I let them know on everything. If I see a wire dangling that shouldn't be, or a burnt wire that wasn't replaced or fixed, my first question to the customer is, has anybody touched this before I've been here in the last few months? And if they say yes, then I says, well, why didn't they catch this?
Like you said, it's a cutthroat business. There's a lot of companies that aren't very good out there. So it's a scary place to be when you have this stuff lingering. Like I see a lot of times the condenser motor capacitor inside where the compressor's at just dangling down. And if you're not looking, you don't see it. But if you leave and all of a sudden something shorts out and trips the breaker, it's on you to do a free callback.
And this is what he told her. He says, you know as well as I do, you've been out to units that have been out there for 20 years and ain't had filter dryers on them, and they're just running fine. He says it doesn't really need a filter dryer.
Yeah, that's kind of scary. Oh, heck no, man. Hell, heck no. I'm going to go take out the ones I have in now because they're so useless.
And I explained it to him, and I explained it to the customer. I says, if it was a straight AC, I wouldn't have said 2 words. Because it's a straight AC. Even though it'd be nice to have one, you don't necessarily have to have it in straight AC. I'd let it roll. Would I not do it myself? No. If it was a straight AC, it's not really harming nothing.
Everybody out there, I like to say that I always use filter dryers. Go ahead, Curtis. I've had enough controversy for this week, Curtis. I'm going to let you have that one by yourself.
Okay, well, it's not controversy. I'm just saying from another contractor's point of view, okay, if it had been a coil with a straight AC and it hadn't had a filter dryer, would it be that much of an issue? To me, no, because it's a straight air conditioner. But it's a heat pump. To me, it makes sense to put a filter dryer on it. That's just me. And the book calls for it in both applications. Now, would I have told the customer if it wasn't on a straight AC? Probably not. being that it's on a heat pump, I want them to have a good piece of equipment because evidently they're going to have to be doing some more work to it and spend more money on it if it doesn't have it.
Well, let me ask you this question. Why would you choose to think it holds less importance on a straight cool?
I have to assume that the installing contractor took the necessary procedures and flushed said line set, blew said line set out, used nitrogen on said new system. So I'd have to give the installing contractor the benefit of the doubt if it was a coil and just straight AC, not to install the filter dryer. And I'm not saying that on every single system. My point of view is I put them in on all my systems. Would I had said something to the customer if it had been a straight AC? More likely not, because it's not, to me, it's just a straight air conditioner. It's not. I assume that the contractor took the right installation procedures and did a good job. Now that I know who did it, I would probably, I'm not going to say snitched on him, but had said something.
We know it's the capacitor in the box type guy. You'd have to say something.
I'm not going to say he's the capacitor in the box type guy, but now that I know who did it, and I'm not saying he does bad work, and I've been with him when he's done a lot of work, so he does good work. He himself. I don't know if he had put his personal hands on this particular project, but seeing that it was him and it got missed, straight AC, I would have said something.
I had an instance one time when I came to a house. A lady called me. It was actually Home Advisor. A lady called me and said, I want you to come take a look at this. I think the installing contractors did something wrong. Which is always like, it's like a friggin' bear trap. Because you don't know what you're going to get into, or this guy's, you're going to his job. It's like being with this guy's wife or something. You're going to go in there and tell these people, yeah, he did a bad job. You know, where's my cookie? So I went in there and I looked at this job and it was horrible. I mean, it was the worst. And I had to tell the lady, I said, this is all messed up. The ductwork was all messed up. It was a zone system.
Mm-hmm.
The zone system was installed improperly. It was dual fuel, a Mana unit, 15 SEER, really nice setup. And it was just all messed up. It was horrible. It wasn't working properly. The zones weren't sized properly. The ductwork was on the ground in the crawl space, wet crawl space.
No.
It was nasty. So this company, which is a national chain, had to come up there and fix all that stuff. Must have cost thousands of dollars. Labor, new metal ductwork. But I mean, it was very, very bad. She called me back up after that. The first time I got paid a couple hours worth of work just to check it out and recommend what I would do. She calls me back. I go back up there. I start the system up. It's supposed to be 15 SEER. Start it up. I have 0 superheat and 0 subcooling. 15 SEER Mana unit has to have a TXV. They had to add a TXV onto it to get to 15 SEER. This had a piston in it, and what's worse, it was the wrong piston. It was oversized because Goodman gives you a coil that's a couple different sizes built into one. It's like a 4860, something like that. So they had a 5-ton piston in this 3.5-ton unit. So I had to go in there and tell the lady, you have to call these people back again and tell them that they had to take the piston out, which is the wrong one, and put in a TXV because it's not 15 SEER. I'm sure these guys just want to kill me. If they knew where I would, they would show up at my house and just kick the dog out of me probably. But, you got to do it because it was wrong. I mean, it was really wrong. It's flooding back.
I got something similar to that. The company that I worked for before I went out on my own, went back up and put laid off and forced to go out on my own, I had 5 Mana 95% gas furnaces, high efficiency air conditioning coils, 18 SEER heat pumps. Can you guess what my problem was?
Well, there's a few guesses I have. Of course, it can't be the lack of the TXV. It could be the wrong coil. What was it?
It was the lack of a TXV.
They had 18 SEER 2-stage unit on a piston?
5 of them.
That's really bad on 2-stage. The regular unit's supposed to be 15 SEER. That's bad, but on 2-stage, that's real bad. Wow. So you had to go and add TXVs on all those units?
I didn't. I got laid off at the time. It was another year before they decided to do anything about it. They asked me to give them a price. I gave them a price of $2,500 because, you got to pump it down, got to add the TXV, pull a vacuum, get it running, and then get it dialed in.
Right.
I thought that was a fair price.
I'm sensing there was some disagreement.
Well, seeing that a company came in and said they would do it for $1,200,
They got the job. Good grief, Ameristar. I thought you were going to be cheaper.
Cheaper hell. And this was a big company. And it was a company I had worked for before in the area. I knew who it was. I talked to my buddy when he told me, because he still works for the place. And he told me they were going to do it. And I says, how are they making any money? The TXVs are $100 a piece. There's no money there. No money at all.
Yeah, you got to get those TXVs. You got to get those tubes and braze them into the suction line for the equalizer. A little bit of work there to each one of those.
Yeah, so you're talking at least 2 days worth of work. 3 of them were on a mezzanine where you could get, like in a little area where you could get to them real decently. But 2, you'd had to get off of a 12-foot ladder. It was no easy feat. You're at least a day and a half's worth of work. You can't pump all 5 down in this building. You can only do 1 at a time in a commercial application. Snow spilt milk over that, man. It was okay. Now, did they do a good job?
I don't want to presume, but I'm pretty sure those are the most efficiently and expertly installed TXVs in the history of mankind.
Oh, I'm sure they were. I'm sure they were. I got to give a lady a price on mini splits. I'm yet to win a mini split job. Yet. I did one system last year. One system. It was just a single zone. It was a Mitsubishi.
Now, why is that, Curtis? Are you pricing them high because you're unfamiliar with mini split jobs? Or you just think you're getting lowballed?
I think I'm getting lowballed. The last price I gave was 4 heads, 2 units, labor and everything. I think I was right at 10.
Well, it sounds pretty fair to me. I mean, that's a big job.
Yeah, I mean, it was an older house. Of course, I called him back and he said, well, you're a little too high. We're going to get this other company to do it. I was like, okay.
Oh, man. Did you get to find out what you got beat by?
No, I wish. I did a job here for a new contractor here in town, an addition, and they loved my price. My price was $4,000 cheaper than the competitor, okay, that they usually use. So, of course, I got the job. They were building a new office on their site, and they wanted me to do the work. So he says, give me a price. So I give him a price. And, of course, the same guy that I beat out on this other project gave them a price, too. Well, he was $1,000 cheaper than I was. I don't see how in the world.
I see stories down there, these Florida guys. You know, we see our good buddy Justin Hernandez, the Joker. He tells stories about the guys selling units for $2,700 or $2,900 or making $200 on the job. How would you like to do that, Curtis? I'd just rather not get the job. Stay home and watch television.
I mean, for that, no. No, I mean, it's different when you've got a business to run. The guy's traveling farther than me. How do you have a $4,000 difference on a job that is 3 times as small as the one that I was getting ready to do, and you beat me by $1,000? That to me is, I don't know. Doesn't sound right, but that's fine.
Yeah, Curtis. Whatever. Just whatever. Okay, fine. Whatever. That's fine. Next time I'm quoting Ameristar mini splits next time. Guys, thank you for listening to The Tradesman. And don't forget, you can find The Tradesman on Facebook as a page. Like us, follow us there. Also, don't forget there's a lot of great podcasts coming out this week. Tomorrow, of HVAC Shop Talk, which will also have another episode on Friday. The great Jim Bergman will appear again. On Wednesday, for the first time ever, we have the Tool Pros podcast with Billy Noth and Brent Ridley. So all through the week, you're going to have good stuff. And of course, there'll be Brian Orr in there somewhere, randomly, with his podcast. It's always like a nice surprise when we see a new HVAC school podcast. So until next week at this time, I'll see you guys on the next one. I got to the end of this podcast. I actually had it uploaded to the podcast hosting site. And I have to pick the date at which the podcast comes out. I recorded this on Saturday, parts of it on Sunday, and now on Monday, the podcast will be released. And I looked down and I saw that it was 9/11. And I realized I hadn't said anything about 9/11 in the podcast because I didn't realize that was the date it was coming out. So I want to take a moment and go back and put this into the actual recording. 9/11 was a very tragic day for our country. I can't believe it's been 16 years since it happened. I remember exactly where I was. I was at my parents' house. We were actually going to an HVAC job that day. Keeping in mind, this was, I guess, 2 years after I'd got my license. We told that story earlier. 2001. We were going to a job downtown, historical home, a remodel, and I was in my parents' living room. And a plane had hit one of the towers, and I was standing there, and I watched on the screen as the second plane came in and hit the tower. At that moment, we knew that it was no accident. It was actually an attack on our country. And for the rest of the day, we just sort of huddled around whatever radios we had. No one had MP3 players at that point. It was all just truck radios. I don't even think we had any job site radios. We might have had those back then. I cannot remember. We were huddled around those radios, whether it be in the cars, on site, or whatever. We didn't get any work done that day. We really couldn't bring ourselves to work because we had to find out whether our country was at war. We had to find out what was going on. And it was a day I'll always remember. I assume this is what guys felt whenever they were around during Pearl Harbor and getting news. It was an event I'll never forget. And I think we should take a moment here and think about those guys, those 3,000 people in those buildings that did not make it out, the firefighters that did not make it out. And remember, we live in a dangerous time. We do dangerous work. A lot of us do dangerous work. We talked to Rob about arc flashes. You know, you're there 1 second, and then you're gone. These people were killed in a very brutal way. So pray for them. Do whatever you can, because they're up there in heaven now, hopefully looking down on us in a lot more peaceful location. So on 9/11, remember, this was a day that was a tragedy. We got to see some beautiful things from people, saving people's lives, people helping others. But it's a day that I'll live on in my life. I'll always remember exactly where I was. And I'm guessing if you guys were alive at that point, you do too.